Welcome everybody to a straight shoot, quick shoot episode where we're going to be talking about some of the best returns of all time, off of the back of potentially one of the best returns of all time, The Fiend returning back at Extreme Rules. Now, we made a rule that it can't be one of the four that we picked, but I think we want to acknowledge that we think that was one of the best returns of all time. What do you think?
Oh, Santi, listen, it's hands down just the views on it on social media. 7.7 million views in just under 12 hours shows how big this was for the wrestling industry, for the community, being teased for nearly 6 weeks. Him trending left, right, and center on all forms of social media. My God, like it was, and just the cinematics to it, Santi, like you and I sat there, and I'm so glad we got it recorded, that our faces were just in shock. Yeah. It was pure. I felt like a kid again. I really did feel like a kid again, just with the surprise of what we're watching. It was new, it was fresh, and I can't wait for what this storyline brings. But like when we're going to talk about some of the greatest returns of all time in 10 years, Bray's in there.
Yeah,
simple as that.
100%. I'm just glad that we got our boy Rambling Rabbit back in the mix. Let's go. But what's funny, Steve, is my first one is actually very similar to what we got here just almost 20 years ago. So let me paint the picture. Y'all know I like to paint the picture before I tell you what my choice is. Well, I guess it's kind of a spoiler here, but it's The Undertaker. But when I started watching wrestling, really late 90s, early 2000s, I didn't know what the Dead Man was. Okay. Yeah. I was somebody that traded VHS tapes, so I had seen matches of The Undertaker as the Dead Man, but I never witnessed the Dead Man on a week-to-week basis. All I knew was the American Badass. My childhood version of Undertaker is Big Evil coming out in the motorcycle. There was a storyline in 2003, I believe, where he lost a Buried Alive match against Vince McMahon. A lot of people mistake it against and say it's against Kane, but no, it's against Vince McMahon. Kane interfered in the match and buried The Undertaker alive. And 6 months later, we get the return of The Undertaker through vignettes haunting Kane, saying, "I'm coming back. The Dead Man is coming back." And Kane, week through week for months, is screaming, "I killed you. I buried you." And then we got, for the first time in a very long time, the gong that would become stay as the Undertaker's theme song for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
In Madison Square Garden with the monks, the druids holding the torches, and we get the now iconic Undertaker entrance with the fog, the smoke, the gong, the lights. We didn't really have that even before that, not to that level of presentation, at least. I had goosebumps then. I have goosebumps talking about it now. It was, I feel like if we had social media back then to the level that we have it now, it would be right there with that Bray Wyatt return.
Absolutely. This was the first time that we actually got to see almost like the bounty hunter version of the Dead Man. I remember that image of just him standing, and it was just that black silhouette. It's iconic. Absolutely iconic. And the cinematics and the presentation of his entrance really was taken to the next level with this return. So yeah, like you're bang on, like, with one of the greatest returns of all time, because it really, like Jericho, but always, like, I think the Undertaker has always done it so well. When he needs to reinvent himself, he does it to the nth degree.
Yeah.
And this really started that next level of the Undertaker. So dude.
And what I'll add is, what's interesting about that return, I said a return from 6 months off from Survivor Series to WrestleMania, but you can actually sit here and make the argument that it's a return from years off, because the Dead Man was not the Dead Man. It wasn't the supernatural version that we had. He was gone since what, 98? Maybe something early 99?
98, 99, yeah.
So it was 5+ years in the making of the return of the Dead Man. And one more thing that I'll add here before I pass it off to you to give me your first is that this is the quintessential picture perfect blueprint of WWE back in the day in that Ruthless Aggression era when they were so good at long-term storytelling.
Yeah.
This was the plan. Clearly all along, because it's so perfect. The dead man coming back after a buried alive match. It's just long-term storytelling that, we might be coming back to these days, but that was WWE at its best.
Oh, absolutely. Santi, I'm going the other end of the spectrum. I'm going something very recent, which is very rare for me. Especially when we do these ones, I always tend to pull from the Attitude Era. But for my first one, I'm going with someone who really had that lightning in a bottle for a couple of years before they had to take their time off. And I'm going with Becky Lynch's return at SummerSlam last year. Arguably one of the biggest female superstars of all time, and really the one that you never thought was going to revolutionize the women's division when it came to like the four horsemen. You always thought Charlotte, Sasha, Bayley. Becky was kind of that ugly duckling, is how I'm going to put it. But then obviously with that build through Survivor Series, the turn on Charlotte Flair after Charlotte got forced into that match and just basically handed the title, you finally got to see Becky crack and come into her own as the man. And then obviously the whole storyline with Ronda and Survivor Series and the female invasion of SmackDown into Raw. Becky was the biggest superstar pre-pandemic. I don't think there's many others that you could put that was selling as much merchandise and was as viewed and followed on social media. Becky was killing it. And then I'm not saying unfortunately, I say for wrestling fans, unfortunately, Becky had to go away. Her and Seth Rollins got pregnant with their daughter, Rue. And, it happens, it happens in life. But I think the anticipation for Becky's return was so dragged on, and how she came about it with literally trolling us for nearly a year. Say, like, every pay-per-view she would post outside the arena on Twitter.
Yep.
And like social media would blow up. She would post a little comment, "Ooh, this is interesting," and literally make us feel that she's still relevant even though she's gone. And Becky herself did a great job at doing that. But then the pop, and it was needed for the women's division at that time as well. The pop Becky got at SummerSlam and that return on Bianca Belair and the squash match put Becky basically right back in that line of fire and gave her that lightning in a bottle, which led to a great feud. The fans were about it. The social media was all about it. It wasn't one of those iconic, really, changing the landscape back into her favor. She was put back into it, but it didn't change the landscape of the division. But you knew the man was back, and she was back to take what her place is and rightful place was where she left off, which I think, for me, for a female's return, nothing against the female division, but for a female's return to be that over, especially with the likes of Brock Lesnar returning that night as well, and Becky still talked about just as much, it's huge.
100%. All right. Move on to my next one here. I'll go to a recent one the same year. I am going to give you John Cena returning at Money in the Bank against Roman Reigns. Now, there are a couple John Cena quote unquote returns that people like to toss out. The big one is the return at Madison Square Garden at the Royal Rumble, coming in at number 30 when he was expected to be gone for a year from I believe it was a torn pec or a torn bicep. I can't quite remember what the injury was. And he came back after 4 months. That's insane. Superhuman. And the pop was wild. Madison Square Garden never fails to deliver. But this one just seems more special to me. And I'm gonna tell you why. This, to me, Steven, I told you before we started recording, The return of John Cena at the end of the show at Money in the Bank, to me, marked the true end of the pandemic era of WWE television. So, yes, before Money in the Bank, we had WrestleMania with 30% capacity. All right. It's not conducive enough for very loud pops, but still, it felt like we were getting there. It still felt like pandemic era wrestling. And we thought, okay, we had fans at WrestleMania. We can go back to fans in arenas. No, we got the Thunderdome for another 3 months with the screens. And the first show that we had in an arena with a full audience was Money in the Bank 2021. For all accounts, a pretty decent show. Ended with Roman Reigns, retaining the title. Show's about to go off the air, and boom, we get the John Cena trumpets, and the pop that we got was deafening. But the reason it was deafening wasn't just because John Cena returned. It was because it was 2 years worth of pent up emotion.
Yeah.
Coming out of fans. They haven't had a moment like this in actually at that point a year and a half because of the pandemic. Years of wrestling experiences had been lost, and it felt like John Cena's return really marked the point where wrestling is back, getting loud is back, big pops are back, live crowds are back. And it was also just that essence of John Cena, you might not love him, but you'll miss him when you don't have him anymore. And you got him back, and you felt like, you felt that essence of wrestling pre-pandemic again, the 2017, 2016. I loved, to me, it's a special return because it's John Cena, of course, but it's just a special return because it led to Becky Lynch's return in a full stadium at SummerSlam a couple months later. It led to Brock Lesnar's return. It was I'm smiling ear to ear just talking about it because I really do think that this was the end of an era of potentially the darkest times in professional wrestling.
Actually, I'll just add to, I think, darkest times in this generation,
Sure.
period. I think everything that we all lived through, I think we needed that. And even myself, not being a John Cena fan, like, I enjoyed the crowd pop for that. I remember you and I chatting shortly after that about how crazy that was. And we hadn't gotten that since Royal Rumble right before the pandemic with Edge returning. And granted, massive return. And it could have been on either one of our lists, but it's just one of those ones. I think that's exactly what you say. We needed that. We really needed to let that one out, and the fans did it justice. Like, I think that was, for me, one of the loudest pops I've ever heard for John Cena. Simple as that.
All right, what's your next one?
So, Santi, I am finally going back to the Attitude Era. And this one, I explained this to you before we started recording. It's Triple H's return after tearing his quad. January 7th, 2002. Listen, before I go into why, Triple H has always been a heel. Up until recently, Triple H was always recognized as one of the most diabolical heels, the cerebral assassin, the king of kings, the game, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the entitled Greenwich, Connecticut, whatever he was. Like, he's always been a heel. And Grant, first off, the injury that he suffered almost a year prior. I think it was in May that he suffered the injury, and it's a freak accident that you never want to see. And it was also a return that was announced. Triple H is coming back. And you never knew what you were really going to get because he was always that heel. He was always that bad guy. But when he came back and his music hit, the crowd lost it. Like, it was one of those ones where, like, I remember watching it as a kid. I'm excited, and I don't know why, because I never liked Triple H. It's always been the bad guy, right? And when he came out, the emotion he showed, he wasn't a bad guy. He was just happy to be back on the stage. He was hyped. He was amped. He was massive. Like, he was a monster returning. And it's like, oh my God, I'm excited for this guy, and I don't know why. Like, he's a staple in WWE at the time, but it's just like, why am I so excited for a heel to be returning? It just, and the crowd embodied that. And he came out, he cut a great promo, and it led to so many big feuds shortly in that 2002 to 2005 run of the the cerebral assassin and the savagery that Hunter was able to come with and just reinvented himself almost. It was amazing. And again, for me, it all comes down to the pop when it comes to a return. And that pop in a small stadium of 15 to 14,000 people was huge. And I still I watched these back before we started filming, and that one gave me the biggest goosebump. Granted, the one I have next is the biggest pop I think of all time, but this one here just meant so much, I think, to the wrestler and the fans at the same time that I couldn't leave it off the list.
I mean, I agree with you. Plus, let's not forget he came out in that Canadian tuxedo, full denim jacket and jeans. Gotta love that.
Oh yeah, it was so good. It just the look on his face about how much the business has always meant to him, and I think every wrestler speaks to it so highly that the business means everything to Hunter, and that return just must have just been for him. Just the feeling inside, like I would love to have that and capture that just for myself for one time.
Enough. All right, I'll move on to my next one here. Steve, this one is near and dear to my heart because this is what got me back into professional wrestling. Just as a quick backstory to those that are listening and that are watching here on YouTube, I was on a hiatus from professional wrestling from early 2007 to 2011. I didn't watch anything. I'm talking nothing, not even pay-per-views. YouTube clips weren't a thing back then. I didn't read dirt sheets, nothing. I was completely cold turkey on professional wrestling. And then I heard that this happened. So I went back to watch the episode of Monday Night Raw. And I'm talking about when The Rock returned to announce to be the host of WrestleMania 27. I think the WWE kind of ruined the return with the weird presentation that they did with the announcer being like, and now the host of WrestleMania is, and then it's like this 2-minute weird drum roll almost.
It was like the electric surge running through the crowd. I remember that clearly.
Yeah. I didn't like that. But it's still the freaking Rock, dude. The Rock. Yeah. Gone from WWE for 7 years, since 2004, and that 2004 was barely even The Rock, because he was just back for one match at WrestleMania 20. He wasn't really full time since early 2003. When he left after losing to Goldberg and Backlash 2002 or 2003, whatever it was. So it was like 8 years since we've really had The Rock. Yeah. And I have to put this on here as one of my favorite returns because it single-handedly got me back into professional wrestling. The Rock was my favorite of all time, far and away at that moment in time. I then grew to love and appreciate our Lord and Savior John Cena, but that's maybe a topic for a different video. But The Rock returning is what got me back into professional wrestling as a whole. Was I pumped that it was to host WrestleMania? No, I would have loved to see him in the ring, and it ended up being one of the worst WrestleManias of all time.
Yeah.
But it still made it digestible, all right? And it led to, The Rock returning for those 2 matches for John Cena. Yes, great. It wasn't a great WrestleMania. Yes, WWE kind of ruined it with their presentations. But 8 years of not hearing If You Smell What The Rock Is Cooking will get you up and out of your seat. I don't care who you are and how long you haven't been watching professional wrestling for, to the point where I credit that return, Steve, for me being here sitting with you talking about professional wrestling. Had that not happened, I do not fall back in love with professional wrestling. I do not watch it week in, week out. I do not watch every pay-per-view. I do not meet you and start talking about professional wrestling. And I do not start a podcast and a TikTok page about professional wrestling. It just doesn't happen. To me, that return just is, there will come a time where there is somebody that's listening to this that is 12 years old that will experience this with maybe John Cena returning 10 years from now, maybe from a really long hiatus, maybe Roman Reigns returning or something along the lines of that. There will come a time where somebody who is younger will experience this. And I cannot wait for you to be able to experience this, something that will get you to fall back in love with the product of your childhood.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, Santi, because you hit the nail on the head across all of it. And this was actually around a time that I wasn't really watching wrestling either. And my partner at the time told me about the return, and this is when I first knew what YouTube was. And I went on, and I think I watched that return on YouTube easily 100 times. And it was goosebumps after goosebumps after goosebumps of just watching this over and over. And it was one of those ones that I can say, yeah, it got me fully back and immersed in pro wrestling. And the other thing is, I loved the whole Cena Rock feud that it led to. So I think it's probably one of the only Cena feuds I really enjoyed. So that says a lot. The one thing I want to crack onto before I get to mine, Santi, if you go back and watch that return, and when you hear the "if you smell," the whole crowd is black, but you can see the silhouette of this one guy, and he flies out of the alleyway or of his seat and actually bails down the flight of stairs. So if you go back and watch that video again, watch for the guy that eats shit down the flight of stairs because he's losing his mind. It's so good. Anyways, okay, and I guess for the final one, Santi, I'm going back to like my heyday of pro wrestling, and around the same time as Hunter's return, 2 years before, I'm going to Backlash 2000. Arguably one of the loudest pops you have ever heard in professional wrestling. And it's the return of the Rattlesnake. I'm sorry, the GOAT, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Man was never the same since he broke his neck in 1997 with the freak accident with Owen. He had to go away and have his surgery in 99 just to get himself resorted. And they did this. I think they did a great story about this too. It was the whole Rikishi or Stone Cold getting run over by a mystery person. And they actually carried the storyline through the entire time he was gone. And it was like The Rock and Rikishi and the McMahons and Triple H all trying to figure out who ran over Stone Cold Steve Austin. And they carried this storyline very well. And then we got the "I did it for The Rock" from Rikishi, which is the weirdest thing. Like, I never understood how it could have been Rikishi, but whatever. I digress. It was Rikishi. But then we got Stone Cold returning to attack Vince and Triple H and back up The Rock at Backlash in 2000. And Santi, I can still hear it. It's one of those ones, people will say the Hardys' return in the open stadium was so loud. Edge's return at Rumble was loud. Bray's return recently was loud. But there is nothing for me that will ever beat this crowd, because it was a unanimous everyone out of their seats in one shot, because all you wanted was the man that was carrying the business for so long in Stone Cold Steve Austin to come out, open a can of whoop ass, drink some beer, beat the shit out of more people, drink more beer, raise his middle fingers, and go back. And that's what they got tenfold in this return. And I think it was one of those ones, kind of like the pandemic era, that WWE needed that kind of pop, and we got that with John Cena. Like you said, it was kind of like the erase. Now we got the guy that we need to carry the business for the next couple of years back, and he did it so well. He was never the same after breaking his neck, but god damn was that pop good.
It was it's the loudest pop, I think. And funny enough, like, it's the only one that really rivals it is also Stone Cold coming out to help mankind. But I argue that this is a louder pop. That was also coming off the backs of a WrestleMania where we missed Stone Cold at WrestleMania 2000, and many for the time peg that as one of the worst WrestleManias in a long time, because like the main event didn't have Stone Cold. So yeah, WWE was going through its own dark times where they didn't have the guy, the moneymaker. Yeah, sure, The Rock is there, but The Rock was a number two. As much as you want to say The Rock was the top guy in the business, sure, he would be the top guy of the business if Stone Cold wasn't there. So getting Stone Cold back in that pop, that's one of those that I've watched over and over and over again on YouTube as well. So I don't blame you. It's such a the crowd just comes unglued all in unison, like all at once. And I'm pretty sure in the background you can see some beers, some fans spilling beers and drinks and stuff because of just how fast they stood up. It's so good.
Oh, dude, it will go down as quite potentially the greatest pop of all time. Maybe not the greatest return, but I genuinely believe that is the greatest pop of all time.
All right. Are we wrapping it up there? Or do you have another one?
No, I only had 3. If you want to throw one more out,
sure,
please feel free to.
I'll throw one more out there. I'll toss Brock Lesnar out because of I was so spoiled with WWE back-to-back years. Night after WrestleMania was a thing, and I cannot wait for night after WrestleMania with Triple H back at the helm. All right, that could actually be, night after WrestleMania can actually be a thing.
We might actually have to do a live just for that one.
So here's the thing. Yes, we got Brock Lesnar back that night also after being gone around 7-8 years. The difference being is that Brock Lesnar left completely with this gap where he could have been a 40-time world champion. Honestly, just the way that his career was going. He went and conquered the UFC. So we got an evolved Brock Lesnar that now had this scary grit to him because he was a legit fighter, right? A accomplished legit fighter. But I love this return, Steve, because it was, it's not pre-internet. Like 2012 is not necessarily pre-internet, but it's definitely really easily accessible wrestling news in dirt sheets. This didn't break out. There were some people that knew, but this did not break out. There was anticipation about the potential of Brock Lesnar signing with the WWE, but you still didn't believe it, Like it was John Cena is calling out The Rock, and there's this like 15 seconds of silence, and you're like, is it The Rock? No way. No. Okay, we're at 7 seconds of silence. They wouldn't do we're at 10. Holy shit, it's Brock Lesnar. At like that 12-second of silence, you just like come to the realization it's Brock Lesnar, and everyone comes unglued to the point where it made one guy famous, the Brock Lesnar guy with the meme of him dancing and doing the Brock Lesnar. Anyways, I love that return because again, it is the return of an entire era of professional wrestling to the doldrums of the early 2010s where wrestling was bad, man. It was bad. And I feel like this was one of those nights that started turning it good again. Because The Rock came back, but that year between The Rock coming back and Brock Lesnar coming back was garbage WWE. And Lesnar coming back from there on, it was like really good stuff. So Brock Lesnar bringing back the Ruthless Aggression era in 2012, hell yeah, that's up there for me.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add to that one is it actually showed on Brock Lesnar how much it meant to him as well. Like I don't think I know you've watched this 1,000 times, but when he walks out, I don't think anyone understands. That wasn't a flex. That wasn't him popping his chest. That was him getting chills about how he twitched. Like he was shook. You could see the goosebumps on his arms. He was emotionally invested in that return. And I think that showed a nicer, there's never a nice side of Brock Lesnar, let's be fucking real. But it just showed that the business still meant something to him. And he came out and he was ruthless. He was savage. He beat the absolute crap out of Cena, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But I'm just saying it showed that there's emotion behind this beast. And that's one thing I just took from that return, is just how much it meant to him as well.
100%. Yeah. Anyway, Steve, where can people find you?
Twitch.tv/Mr. Tesh, Wednesday through Sunday. I'll be streaming 3 to 4 times a week. And over on my Twitter, since Santi always pushes Twitter during our lives, Twitter/Mr. Tesh. Please give me a follow. I got some good shit over there. Such good shit. Santi.
You can find me over on Twitch. That's what I'll plug right now. Twitch.tv/Santi's app. The link will be down in the description below, as well as all of the other social media that I have, like TikTok and Twitter. So check those out. Thank you very much for watching here on YouTube. Make sure to leave it a like, a comment. If you are new here, consider subscribing. It is free. You can always change your mind, but this way you'll get notifications of whenever we upload new quick shoots or full-length episodes of the podcast. Thank you very much for watching, and take care. Be good people.